They say the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. For 3 days, she outshot every operator on the base. Silent, focused, flawless. Then a commander stormed in, furious that a woman was making his unit look weak. He shouted his rank like a weapon, shoved her in front of his men, expecting her to break. She didn't flinch. What happened in the next 5 seconds ended his career and revealed a truth buried under layers of classified clearance. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of quiet strength and hard-earned respect, consider subscribing. This is a story about the operator no one saw coming. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the first rifle shot cracked across the range at Naval Special Warfare Training Facility Coronado. The sound was sharp and clean, cutting through the cool California morning like a blade through silk. Dozens of operators moved in synchronized formation across the firing line, their boots kicking up small clouds of dust that caught the early light. Brass casings tumbled through the air in slow arcs, glinting gold before they clattered onto the concrete. The smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air, mixing with salt from the nearby ocean. This was where the best of the best came to prove themselves, where every movement mattered and every shot told a story about the person pulling the trigger. Among the shooters stood a figure that most of the men barely noticed. She wore the same tactical fatigues as everyone else, the same dark boots, the same protective gear, but there was no name tape on her chest, no rank insignia on her collar, just a simple contractor identification badge clipped to her vest, the plastic catching light as she moved through the drill with mechanical precision. Her rifle came up smooth, settled against her shoulder like it had always belonged there. And when she fired, the target downrange absorbed the round exactly where it needed to go. Not close to center, not near the bullseye. Dead center every single time. Lennox Cade had learned a long time ago that invisibility was its own kind of armor. In a world where everyone was trying to be seen, trying to prove they belonged, she had mastered the art of blending into the background until the moment it mattered. Her movements were efficient, stripped of any wasted motion or unnecessary flourish. She didn't adjust her stance for show. She didn't make a production of reloading. She simply did the work, completed each drill with the kind of quiet competence that came from doing something so many times that it stopped being a skill and became instinct. The other operators moved around her like water flowing around a stone. Some glanced her way occasionally, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to casual dismissal. A woman on the advanced range was unusual, but not unheard of. Contractors came and went all the time. Civilian specialists brought in to fill gaps or provide specific expertise. Most assumed she was some kind of technical advisor, maybe a marksmanship coach or a program evaluator, someone who could shoot well enough to demonstrate techniques, but who would never be mistaken for someone who had actually been downrange, who had actually operated in the places where mistakes meant body bags and mission failure. They had no idea who she really was. That was exactly how it needed to be. From the observation tower overlooking the range, Master Chief Rohr tracked her through a pair of high-powered binoculars. He was a man who had spent 26 years in naval special warfare, who had trained thousands of operators and learned to read people the way some men read books. He knew what good shooting looked like. He knew what great shooting looked like. And what he was watching through those binoculars was something else entirely. It was the kind of shooting that came from muscle memory so deeply ingrained it might as well be genetic, the kind that only appeared after someone had fired so many rounds under so many different conditions that their body knew what to do before their brain finished processing the situation. He lowered the binoculars and keyed his radio, his voice low and controlled. "Command, this is Rohr. Who cleared the civilian contractor for live fire advanced?" The radio crackled with static for a moment before a voice responded, flat and bureaucratic. "Command authorized it, Chief. That's all you need to know." Rohr's jaw tightened. He had been running training programs long enough to know when he was being stonewalled, and he had learned to recognize the particular flavor of stonewalling that meant something classified was happening right under his nose. He glanced back down at the range, watching Lennox transition from standing to kneeling position with the kind of fluid grace that suggested she had done it 1,000 times under fire. Whatever she was, whoever she wasn't just some contractor brought in to observe training protocols or evaluate program effectiveness. The drill continued for another 40 minutes, moving through various scenarios and stress positions. Lennox participated in each one without speaking, without drawing attention to herself, without doing anything except executing every task with flawless precision. When the rangemaster called for a break, most of the operators headed toward the shade, pulling off helmets and gloves, laughing and talking as the adrenaline slowly bled off. Lennox simply moved to a bench near the equipment shed, sat down, and began the methodical process of field stripping her rifle for cleaning. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, each motion economical and purposeful. She didn't look up when a shadow fell across her workspace, didn't acknowledge the presence of the young SEAL who had stopped a few feet away, watching her work with barely concealed curiosity. Petty Officer Bridger had been with the teams for 6 years, had deployed 3 times, and considered himself a better-than-average shot. He had also just watched this woman outshoot him by a margin that made him question whether he actually knew anything about marksmanship at all. "You shoot well," he said finally, the words coming out more like a question than a statement. Lennox didn't look up from her rifle. "Thank you. Where did you train?" "Various places." Bridger waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. After a moment of awkward silence, he tried again. "You contract for the Navy often?" "When needed." The conversation, if it could even be called that, died there. Bridger stood for another few seconds, clearly wanting to ask more questions, but unable to figure out how to get past the wall of polite distance she had erected. Finally, he nodded and walked away, heading toward where his teammates had gathered in the shade. Lennox watched him go from the corner of her eye, her expression unchanged, then returned her attention to her rifle. In the mess hall 2 hours later, the conversations were louder and less guarded. The SEALs ate with the kind of focused intensity that came from burning thousands of calories during training, their voices rising and falling in the familiar rhythms of military banter. War stories were swapped, jokes were made, and the pecking order of the unit expressed itself in 100 small ways through who sat where and who spoke when. Lennox sat alone at a corner table, eating quickly and efficiently, her attention seemingly focused entirely on her food. But she was listening. Always listening. "Did you see her groups this morning?" That was Bridger's voice, pitched low but not quite low enough. He was sitting 2 tables over with 3 other operators, his back to her, but his words carrying clearly in the acoustics of the hall. "The contractor?" Another voice, slightly dismissive. "Yeah, I saw. She got lucky." "That wasn't luck, man. I've been shooting professionally for 6 years. I've never seen anyone put rounds that tight at 300 meters. Not in field conditions, not consistently. So she's a good shot. Doesn't mean anything. Plenty of people can shoot well on a range who freeze up when things get real. Maybe. But did you see how she moved? The way she transitioned positions? That wasn't range training. That was something else." A pause, then a third voice, thoughtful and more measured. "You think she's been downrange?" "I don't know what I think, but I know what I saw. And what I saw was someone who's done this before, a lot." The conversation shifted to other topics after that, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. Lennox finished her meal, cleaned her tray, and left without acknowledging any of them. As she walked past Bridger's table, she caught his eyes for just a fraction of a second. Something passed between them in that brief moment, a kind of recognition that neither of them fully understood yet. Then she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Master Chief Rohr spent that evening in his office staring at a computer screen that told him almost nothing. Lennox Cade's file was a study in redaction. Black bars covering everything except the most basic information, name, contractor identification number, a notation that she had been cleared by Naval Special Warfare Command for access to the facility. Everything else, every detail that might have told him who she actually was or where she came from or what she had done before arriving at Coronado, was hidden behind security classifications he didn't have clearance to access. He picked up his desk phone and dialed a number from memory, one that connected him to an old friend who worked in personnel management at SOCOM headquarters. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, professional and slightly wary. "It's Roar," he said without preamble. "I need you to tell me what's going on." "Chief," the voice was carefully neutral, "you know I can't discuss classified personnel assignments. I've been running this training program for 12 years. I've seen every operator the Navy has ever put through advanced warfare training. The woman you sent me isn't a contractor. She's something else." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When the voice came back, it was quieter, more careful. "Then trust command, Chief, and keep your head down." The line went dead. Roar sat in the silence of his office, the phone still pressed to his ear, staring at the redacted file on his screen. Outside his window, the base was settling into evening routine, lights coming on in buildings across the compound, the distant sound of the ocean a constant backdrop to everything. He had spent his entire adult life in this world, had learned its rhythms and its rules, had come to understand the way information flowed and how to read between the lines of what people said and didn't say. Right now, every instinct he had was telling him that something significant was happening, that the quiet woman with no name tape and perfect shooting wasn't just here to observe, that whatever audit or evaluation or inspection she was conducting went deeper than training protocols and range safety procedures, and that someone somewhere up the chain of command had decided he didn't need to know the details. He closed the file, powered down his computer, and headed home. But the questions followed him. Day 2 began much like Day 1, with dawn breaking over the range and the sharp report of rifle fire echoing across